The Vancouver Island Economic Alliance is all about achieving a vital and sustainable island region economy. We collaborate with stakeholders to solve problems and promote opportunities. Every October, VAIA hosts the State of the Island Economic Summit, a meeting place for ideas where you can network with decision makers and be informed of relevant grassroots trends in the island economy. VAIA's annual economic report is the only publication of its kind in Canada. It is user-friendly and puts important, timely data at your fingertips. Foreign Trade Zone Vancouver Island provides ready access to Canada's duty and tax deferral opportunities and attracts foreign direct investment to the island region. And the Island Good brand, created by VAIA, makes it easy for shoppers to find local products and is proven to increase sales for island producers. If it's Island Good, whether it's potatoes or gin or mattresses, it's good for our economy, good for sustainability, and good for us all. VAIA, a non-profit membership organization that leads creation of transformative economic opportunities.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us on day 7 of the 7 Days of Seaweed Festival. What an incredible week it has been. I have learned so much, and I continue to learn each and every day. Thank you for joining us this afternoon on this beautiful Sunday on a long weekend in British Columbia for the final speaker in our Industry Speaker Series. I'd like to give a big shout out to Selena and Diana from VAIA, who have supported us in the delivery of this series throughout the week and making themselves available and being our tech support behind the scenes. I really, really appreciate your time and energy and sharing that with us. My name is Erin, and I'm the Manager of Communications and Engagement here at Cascadia Seaweed, headquartered in Sydney, BC. I'll ask that you keep your cameras and mics muted this afternoon for our presentation because there's so many people on the call today, but I suggest you get your fingers ready because I think you're going to have lots of questions during this presentation. I am honored to introduce Karine Toumazeau, who is here with us today. As a senior strategy consultant, Karine spent the last 10 years advising Fortune 500 companies, leading strategic business and technology engagements around the world in banking, retail, automotive, aerospace, food, and energy, everything. In 2020, Karine started Blue Stark, the first agency in Canada to help organizations reinvent the way they do business.
Thank you so much, Erin, for introducing me. I'm going to try to minimize the window here.
Sure. I just wanted to mention, Karine, also that you're a true ocean lover and that you have been a strategic advisor for Coral Gardeners, which is one of the fastest growing coral reef restoration programs in the world. So I am very excited to have you here and to learn from you about how the seaweed industry can flourish as well. Thanks, Karine.
Well, thank you so much, Erin, for giving me really this honor to close this fantastic week. I've had the chance to attend some of the talks and events that you guys organized, and I have to say, I hope everyone had an amazing week really with Cascadia Seaweed and their amazing guests, and that you've been really inspired to get into the space. So today with you, I kind of want to wrap up everything you've learned into a broader perspective on why seaweed, I believe, and hopefully now you believe it too, is an exceptional opportunity to start building a regenerative future. So what does that really mean, and what can you really get from this session? So you've learned a lot during this week, and what I want to share with you today is really an overall perspective on what really needs to happen to make things a reality. So it's about stepping out and seeing the big picture. So from this session and from this talk, and I really want to encourage you to use the chat and have this interactivity. And hopefully I'll have time to answer some of the questions at the end of this talk. But I really want you to inspire you to see the world in a new way and to see it as an interconnected system in which you're going to evolve and which you will play a very important role. I also want to give you an understanding of the shift that really needs to happen to build a regenerative future. It's a fairly new topic, and today I can tell you our economies are absolutely not regenerative. So what I want also to give you is this overview of the different dimensions you can start to look at to design your organization for regeneration. And at the end of this presentation, I will also touch on something that I truly believe will be a game changer, is a mindset shift in leadership. So hopefully in this conversation and in the audience, we have amazing leaders or to-be leaders who are about to enter the workforce. And I want to give you, a shot of inspiration to start challenging the status quo, because this is really what I'm doing with Blue Stark. And this is one of the reasons why I started Blue Stark also as a leader. All right, so let's start. So what really regenerative means? The truth is that there is not one definition of what regenerative means. I've been researching the topic for the past year, and we can basically find with every person one definition of what regenerative means. For some, regenerative means secular, like in the circular economy and secular patterns. For others, it only relates to regenerative agriculture. And yet, at some point in time, our entire economy will have to shift to regeneration. So I try to give you a definition that will kind of embed a summary of what regenerative could mean. And for me, regenerative really means the ability for Earth's life-giving systems to regenerate and support thriving human societies within planetary boundaries. So we know that for 50 years, we thought that basically we could take from the natural world whatever we wanted to sustain our civilization and support an exponential growth. And that we believe that through that growth, we can basically solution everything: inequalities, wealth gaps, you name them. But the reality is that climate change and what we actually think that we're fighting against is only one of the planetary boundaries. And climate change is merely a symptom or a consequence of a deeply degenerative system. Our current systems don't work and cannot be sustained. So we are actually fighting, and this is something that I want you to take away from this conversation. We're not fighting against climate change. We're fighting against ourselves and the system and lifestyles we created. So we can obviously do better, and the seaweed industry has the potential to lead in the regenerative blue economy, just like regenerative agriculture is leading on land. So let's look at closer of what we mean by degenerative and regenerative. So how can we do better? So our current production systems follow a linear pattern of take, make, use, and lose or throw. So we basically take from Earth and we give back to Earth in the shape of waste of energy, in terms of plastic waste. There's so much that we can actually mention. In a regenerative or circular pattern, everything that is taken goes through several iterations of make, consume, regenerate, or make, use, and restore to minimize what is returned as non-organic waste in the environment. So in simpler terms, Regenerative means that you are giving back more than what you take. All right? In the virtuous closed loop of regeneration and restoration. And we also actually call that the butterfly pattern or the butterfly economy. And I think this is amazing because for me, words really matter. And we can actually call something upon, you know, an insect. I think this is just amazing. And we should probably do more of that. But in simpler terms, you know, nothing is used up and thrown away, but it's used again and again through cycles of reuse and renewal at a pace that allows that what you harvest to regenerate before you harvest again. So you can actually clearly see that in that pattern, the seaweed industry can really thrive, right? You only need sun and salty water to make seaweed grow. So it's up to you at the end through your supply chains to make sure that you keep that regenerative mindset and those regenerative pattern so that you give back to nature only what it needs. So I touched on very briefly on why words matter. Personally, I hate the word sustainability. So I'm sorry if in the audience there are sustainability practitioners, but when I got into the space and I bumped into this sustainability word, I found it terribly static and passive. Where regeneration, in my opinion, gives really that sense of movement and infinite flow. And this is, you know, truly what our living systems are. So everything is in movement, and our economy and social systems are also an infinite flow of information, of what we produce, make, consume, use. So words really matter and narratives also matter, but I'll touch on that later. So now to the audience, and I invite you to use the chat. Can you think of another word that would describe the action of giving back more than what you take? One word. And Erin, if you, I have access to the chat so I can actually see. Virtuous, thank you, Duncan. Anyone else? Selfless, all right, Linda, yeah, that's true. Generous, you got it, Jordan, yeah. Anyone else? Considerate, yep. So all those words are actually valid. And someone actually nailed it down. For me, regenerative means generous. And if you guys actually read the book of Kate Raworth, Donut Economics, she also touched on this principle of being generous and adding generosity as part of your corporate agenda. So regenerative means generous. You're giving back more than what you take. And basically, instead of aiming to do less bad, like most of corporations today are thinking in their net zero commitments, we can actually design industries to do more good. You know, it's less bad versus more good. And more good is a way more energizing, and some of the words that you guys rightfully entered in the chat, way more energizing, right? Because in that way, you can continually replenish rather than deplete your natural resources. So once again, another little game for you. Generosity is not really the word that comes to your mind when you think about business. So what is the first word that comes to your mind? And again, please use the chat. Profit, yeah. Service. Anyone else? Market, yes. Industry. Production, all right. Yeah. So I must say, I'm surprised. Growth is another valid term, exactly. All right. So when someone asked me the question, what does business mean to you? Or I would say, you know, 10 years ago when I started my career, the first word that came to my mind was profit, but also money. All right. And I want to give you a bit of context why we think in consciousness, why we think business is equal to growth, profit, or money. In the 1970s, a famous economist, Milton Friedman, wrote in the New York Times that the social responsibility of business is to increase its profits. And since then, our economic theories that our entire world follow put profits and exponential growth at the heart of everything. So now you fast forward to 2021, and after a pandemic, you can actually see that there's something wrong with the assumptions. We know by facts that for 50 years, we have been operating this world under false assumptions. And the pursuit of profit and exponential growth isn't really responsible and cannot be sustained because our Earth's life-giving systems cannot regenerate. So now I gave myself the challenge of reframing that quote. For me, and I can't say that I have, the universal answer to this, but for me, I could define the social responsibility of business is to give back to society and the planet, or is to maximize social well-being while preserving the natural world. Or maybe it is to give back more than what you take, that principle of generosity. So getting back to this principle of generosity, the underlying motive to be generous is purpose. And purpose can be really defined simply as the reason for which something is done or for which something exists. So in other words, purpose is your moral compass. It's your North Star. And your purpose will really influence how you produce your goods and services, the kind of products you will sell, who you will work with, how you will take decisions, how you will hire. And your purpose will also help you decide strategically and ethically what is the right thing to do. So let me illustrate a generous purpose, and I hope you're gonna like it. Cove Ocean Foods, how exciting is that? Well, first of all, Erin and team, congratulations, guys. I think this is amazing. And it can't be more exciting, honestly, to see your products on the shelves. So when I read this purpose, Cove exists to address food security and climate change while creating economic opportunities for Indigenous and coastal communities in British Columbia. When I read this purpose, and if I'm walking in the shoes of Cascadia Seaweed, what is it that I want to tell you guys? I want to tell you through this purpose that I'm in business to make sure that you eat products good for your health. In other words, that I want to take care of you. I also want to address climate change. So I become selfless. I will do my part by working for the common good. And through this purpose, I also get a sense that I want to redistribute the value that I create in the form of economic, social opportunities for Indigenous and coastal communities. So even though in the future, I'm going to become a multi-million, multi-billion company, through my purpose, I know I will give back to the communities and to that territory that gives me what I need to offer you my products. So as a leader, it would appear today a complete nonsense to start a business with the sole motive to make money or to make profits. So I'm not against money or profit at all. I'm a business practitioner, so I know the reality of business, but money and profit are simply a consequence of a well-executed strategy and a well-designed business model. And yet, most corporations today are exclusively responding to financial motives. So why is that? And to answer this question, which is not simple to answer, I want to zoom out and show you the entire system that reward those environmentally and socially destructive behaviors. And you're going to be surprised, because I can summarize that in a 3-year-old drawing. Say my drawing skills are not the best, but hopefully this is the best way for me to explain simply why our world currently keep rewarding unsustainable practices. So the world is run by different socioeconomic actors that play in a big playground called markets. Someone in the audience, when I asked what was the word that came to your mind when you thought about business, someone said market. Yes, and markets are basically this big playground where different actors play together. So just like you in the seaweed sector, when you're going to establish your business, you are or will become actors of the market, right? And the rules of the game are set by another set of actors, what I call the enabling environment or the enabling actors, low policymakers, governments, etc. And the actors basically play by these rules to create market dynamics, all right? And in that market, you have winners and losers. So you can see these, and you can look at the orange circle and the blue circle. You can see these as two tightly coupled loops that reinforce each other as the game is played. And the outcome of that game is profits, money. You're here to make money and to win on the market. And sometimes, and I don't want to deep dive too much on this, sometimes the outcome of that game is political elections. So very often, new rules are created to influence actors' behaviors. And very often too, the game is rigged on purpose. All right. And when the game is rigged, is for most of it to pursue wealth accumulation. Sometimes it triggers moral corruption. Corporations or CEOs don't know what's the right thing to do for the common good. And this is what you see 1% of the richest people on earth owning most of the wealth and of most of the value that is created in our economies. So this game basically makes the richer gets richer and the poor gets poorer, exactly like when you play Monopoly. So let me describe very quickly, before we move on, why the system fails in 3 steps. First, the economic and political and social actors operate in an environment, you know, those two reinforcing loops, that reward, incentivize, and even sometimes institutionalize environmentally and socially destructive behaviors through policies, for instance. But what's more problematic, and you're going to see where I'm heading right now, is by doing so, the system shifts away the consequences of harmful behavior from those who cause them to more vulnerable and exposed actors. And here you have to look at the yellow circle, all right? I'm going to give you a very simple example. I'm a big fan of seaweed snacks. You know, even before Cascadia Seaweed got in the space and launched Cove Ocean Foods. If I buy my seaweed snack at my local supermarket, when I eat my snack, the only consequence I feel is how delicious it is. All right, I'm just going to be enjoying my snack and I'm just going to look at it and like, oh, I'm going to buy it again. The consequence is not that it has been produced in completely and sustainable ways in China or Indonesia and probably exploiting workers. And why the system is failing is because the supermarket that sells those snacks do not feel the consequence either. And not even the company that produces and sells those snacks. All right. So the system always shifts all the consequences to more vulnerable actors. And not only actors, but also the environment. When you buy a $10 t-shirt at H&M, you don't know that a family in Bangladesh, you know, will be living next to a river that could be potentially polluted with chemicals that serve to actually produce your t-shirt. And why basically the system will keep on working that way is because the system provides very little to no alternatives or conditions for the actors to change their behavior. And this is basically why we're stuck in this constant fight of who's doing what and whether they're doing the right thing or not. So what do we do? And my answer, also with Blue Star, is to try to disrupt the system from within and to start designing for regeneration and redistribution. So today we really have a unique opportunity to build an industry that will be regenerative and redistributive by design, meaning that they will be built upon generous principles at its core. And Cove Ocean Foods' purpose really translate that into their purpose and into why they got into business in the first place. And I developed a very simple 8P framework because I think it's easier to remember, honestly. I've worked with frameworks and methodology all my life. And honestly, the simpler, the better, less is more. So I basically came up with 8 dimensions that I want to share with you. First, purpose. It's a no-brainer. I talked about it. Reflect really on why the organization exists. Then planet. You have to, when you set up your organization, you have to plan ahead for your carbon neutrality goals and the sustainable development goals. Do not necessarily wait for the enabling environment, meaning policymakers or governments, to actually reward you or incentivize you for your regenerative effort. You have to be a self-starting company and really embed it from the start and at the core of everything you do. So how you define your purpose, basically, how you're going to define your business model, how you treat your employees, how you take decisions with who you do business with. This is something that you can already think through when you set up your organization or when you get into the space. Now, you also can turn climate action into opportunities, right? You can diversify your business model by, for instance, valuing the ecosystem services and properties of seaweed. You've heard a lot. I hope you've learned a lot through the different talks you had during this week. You can use seaweed as carbon capture mechanism, as natural filters for nitrogen, from even biodiversity regulator, all right? And all along the supply chain, farm to fork. And you can also leverage your ecosystem to build new development avenues. For instance, your own Blue certification, provide seaweed farming training. So sky's the limit. And this is really something I want you to take away after this presentation. The sky's the limit. As long as you put yourself in this regenerative mindset that will basically push the seaweed industry in the right direction and that will make it thrive on the long run. The third dimension is people. You have to empower participation and share benefits. In regeneration, you also have this concept of redistribution. So you have to give back to your communities, but you can also establish within your own organizations corporate cultures that foster collaboration, experimentation, trust, rather than fears. I've seen way too many organizations driving their strategic agenda with fear. And COVID-19 has changed everything. And the new generation, maybe some of you are still studying in the audience. I know you guys will have very different needs when it comes to working for some companies. And very few organizations today actually really understand what those needs are. So live your purpose inside and outside, because you may run into trouble if you cannot hire the right talent. All right. For instance, you can join the B Corp movement. That could be a good start. Cascadia Seaweed did it. That gives the right signal on the market. Then we have partnerships. So during this week, you had people, you had guest speakers talking to you about building coalitions aligned to your purpose. The Seaweed Global Coalition, we had the keynote speaker, Vincent Dumesel, on Monday. The Pacific Rivers Association, all of them can help you in your journey. So you can build your own reinforcing loop of value creation, stronger together, align and experiment rather than compete. I want to emphasize on that. You are stronger together. And today is not the time to compete with each other. You have to align and experiment to be able to scale and to accelerate adoption of seaweed as a product or as a raw material used in other industries. Profit. Profit is the fifth P of the list. Extend the definition of success beyond profit. I really mean it. You can create value and measure success beyond traditional financial indicators. I'm not saying ditch completely the profit aspect. It won't work, of course not. But you can also become millionaires and hopefully billionaires in tons of greenhouse gas emissions you'd save from being released to the atmosphere, in the number of jobs that you would create in your industry, or in number even of young people that you inspire to get in the space. And these are really not empty words. This coincides as well with the mindset shift and the moral correction that need to happen at the C-suite level and executive boards for societies to thrive. So the narrative of success needs to change, and it starts with you. So I encourage you to be trailblazers. Next, performance. Of course, we cannot just be dreamers and hope for the good. We have to report on science-based targets and goals. All right. A lot of companies nowadays are pivoting to climate accounting and ESG reporting. I'm a bit, critical about those, because I still see every day, and probably you've seen them as well, examples of companies pledging net zero commitments with very little knowledge of the system they live in, and they're just happy with their accounting. So go the extra mile right away. Do the right thing right away. And remember, if you have to write it down, climate strategy eats science for breakfast. Then policies. As businesses and hopefully future seaweed practitioners, you have to lead on change. You are entering an industry that is still very new and still fairly small compared to other countries. So you will have that role of leading on change and influence policy making. And I know this is probably the hardest part of all. Be business activists. Business activism is actually a new, we start to put words on this. Patagonia has done it for years. Be a business activist rather than lobbyist, all right? You can influence policies for the common good rather than for greediness. You know what I mean? Passion, and I think this is probably the favorite one on my list. And this is also what got me into regenerative economy and strategy, and especially seaweed. Erin told you that I'm also an ocean lover. And I think passion is a very powerful driver. And you can really, through passion, you can really gather around, so many things. You can align on common rules, trajectory, purpose. And if one takes it all, everybody loses, and will take the path of degeneration again. So when you set up your organizations or your businesses, you can, on one hand, change the narrative and explain how passionate you are about this business and what it means to you. But you can also nurture change agents within your organization, your employees, even your families and friends. I mean, I've turned people in my, close network, they didn't know anything about regeneration, and now they're getting interested. So as we move towards the end of this presentation, I also want to add that you have the opportunity to also create pragmatic alternatives for consumers to choose from, right? You can differentiate yourself on the unique attributes of your local products. You don't need to compete with, the Asian market. Don't try to hack the Asian supply chain just yet, right? It doesn't make sense at this point, because you will have to compete on price and volume, and you will need tremendous support from your governments and almost an endless access to funding and capital to make it happen. But what I want to share with you is that you can prepare yourself to think big. Because if you think too small, it's very unlikely that the system will make things easy for you. All right. So be open, build relationships, and work with global coalitions of seaweed producers to accelerate adoption and scalability. Finally, you have to be transparent and authentic. Authenticity today is a very rare quality with social media and all the, the instant gratification type of culture. Authenticity is an underrated quality. You have to show your impact. You can turn consumers, clients into advocates. And honestly, they cannot wait to do so. And I'll be your first cheerleader if you are as authentic as you do your business. So let's move on. Before talking about leadership and the shift that needs to happen, I want to share with you some just focus points. And you've seen throughout the week that you probably touched on some of those points. It's not meant to be an exhaustive list, but more use it as a starter. So what will really be needed for the seaweed industry to take off? And yesterday, the Pacific Growers Association also talked about it. So access to capital and funding. Why is it important? When an industry is very young, you actually need more players to enter the ecosystem to thrive and to accelerate the scalability, adoption, and innovation of seaweed and seaweed products. And this is mostly done at large scale through incentives and favorable policies and regulations to lower barrier to entry for domestic players, for instance. So the government has a very, very, very critical role to play in this. You can even think about putting restrictions or new standards on imported products to kind of create that emulation and motivation for new local and domestic players to enter the industry, right? And as you do that, you will strengthen also, and you will build those relationships, and you will foster that creativity by building those relationships. A three-dimensional governance, what does it mean? That basically that you need to have a clear governance on how you take decisions, how you come up with those policies between local, provincial, and federal governments. For instance, for farming site access and management. And you have to do so by including and even giving the stewardship of indigenous and coastal communities. And the result of that, hopefully, if you understood what I've been talking for the past almost 30 minutes, is that it will eventually trigger a fair redistribution of what you produce. And you have to measure that with social and economic impact indicators. So it looks, I'm an optimistic person, and probably it looks beautiful on paper. So what will be the trigger, and how can we actually disrupt that system from within? And I do believe that it has to start with people. Hence that mindset shift in leadership, right? And this is really what I'm focusing on at the moment with Blue Stark to really develop that training program to initiate that mindset shift. So what does that mean? You are basically uniquely positioned to be the actors and at the same time influence how your enabling environment will be. You will be able to influence policies. You will be able to create those connections so that your industry moves forward. So let me end this conversation about what it means to be a regenerative leader. And I'm not going to lie to you, there is not a lot out there in terms of research and documentation and literature of what a regenerative leader is. All right. But I found one part of the answer in this amazing book called Regenerative Leadership, written by Charles Hutchins and Laura Storm. And they basically developed 6 different dimensions attributes, I would say, to be a regenerative leader. So the first one is that the regenerative leader actually integrates life-affirming principles in everything they do. So what does that mean? When we talk about regenerative and circular economy, those are already life-affirming models. They take life as a model. You can even think of a forest as a factory. How do actually a forest can filter water and reuse that water endlessly? I worked in projects where I had to visit factories and make sure that they were not wasting water and that they can treat and reuse that water all over again in the process. But never, ever I thought about, hey, how actually a forest does that? And I think we would have probably come up with much more creative solutions. Biomimicry is another life-affirming principle. The regenerative leader also acknowledges that everything is ever-changing and responsive. And this is very hard to accept in our societies. So just like the ocean, you will need to develop an ability to navigate all the seas with serenity. So most organizations today are mechanistic. You know, you have this big rigid org structure and every change is painful. You have to be water. You have to go across and you have to basically create those relationships, just like the living world does. And the stronger, or the strongest and richest won't win on the long run, right? It's not because you're today a powerful corporations that you will keep on thriving on the long run. I do believe that the most adaptable organizations will actually win. The third aspect is, as a regenerative leader, you can self-organize based on simple rules, all right? Most organizations are terribly inefficient, and I think that's why consulting firms will never die, honestly. So keep your organizational structure light in complexity and shape that culture of trust, collaboration, and agility. The CEO isn't a dictator, is a facilitator and a listener. And if you're an employee of an organization where you feel your CEO is a dictator, it's very unlikely that this organization will thrive. Rather, you can really empower your employees to make decisions. And there are many ways of doing this. Then you have to understand that everything is relational and interconnected. All right. You're not living in your own bubble, especially in the blue economy. It would be insane to just think that you can do your own thing and actually keep on thriving. So again, to be successful, you will need to create those win-win-win relationships. And through this week, you've built relationships. So reach out, contact people that you've been seeing on screen, whatever your interest may be. Reach out to them and start building those connections and having those conversations. You will also have to thrive in diversity. You know, in the living world, without diversity, there's no life, no evolution. In business, it's exactly the same. No diversity, no innovation, no change. And a lot of organizations perpetuate those traditions that were once innovation, but they're so stuck in their old habits that they think that hiring external firms to solve their problems would kind of solve everything. This is not true. And by being stuck in your traditions and not embracing diversity, it will have an impact in the way that you hire, how you make decisions, the kind of values and goals you will pursue, and it will create that very tedious culture where everyone lives in a disconnected world and maybe mediocrity will reach the top. And you don't want that. So please embrace diversity from the start. Last but not least, you have to respect that everything is cyclical and seasonal. You can reconnect your business to the cycle of life, because your employees are also cyclical and seasonal beings too, right? We can all see it, spring and summer, boom, I want to go outside, I have plenty of vitamin D. You know, it's very well suited for creativity and innovation. You have more energy. You can use the spirit within your organization to have this big brainstorming session off-site seminar and kind of spark that energy. In autumn, for instance, you can be at your peak in terms of execution, delivering fast, boom. And in winter, you can introduce some period of rest and reflections. This is more the deep thinking type of work. And the funny thing is, I've tried that with Core Gunners, the organization I'm involved with, and I can tell you it is so powerful. And our productivity, even with 20 people, we did more than I'm sure most of our organization throughout the pandemic. So as a conclusion, and hopefully in the audience I have a lot of leaders, please tell your story. You have the power really to change the narrative on business and what it really means to you. Build relationships, connect the dots, and lead with purpose. And that's really where you're going to start designing a great industry and organizations. And in any case, and that's something I really want to touch on, through this week, I really, the takeaway I kind of, that sticks to me is that we've got each other's back. We've seen it throughout this week. And I personally believe in this industry. So for whatever you may need, personally, I've got your back. Thank you.
Wow, Karine, I have butterflies in my body. I'm enthusiastic and excited by everything that you had to say, and I have to say a big thank you to the management team at Cascadia for each of you to be these type of leaders and to foster an environment of creative thinking and empowering everybody on the team. I heard in your talk our values, our company values, and I really hope that other organizations that are either starting out or looking to reinvent themselves consider those types of values in their structure, in their organizational structure. So thank you for.
Well, thank you to you to actually change the game and challenge the status quo. It's very admirable, really.
Lots of questions coming through in the chat, Karine. One of them is, who are your heroes? Can you tell us who your heroes are?
Oh, wow. I wish I had more time to think about it. But actually, there's this one lady that it's related to the ocean, and she basically, like, she's disabled, and she can surf still. And sometimes when I get wiped out on my surfboard and I just want to quit and go back to the shore, I think about this lady and how much she enjoys the ocean. And by just being there in the lineup and just waiting for the wave, without speaking, without words, just being present and just, enjoy that connection with nature. I feel like this is, personally, I feel like it's so fulfilling and so inspiring to watch. And sometimes I wish that maybe we talk less and we do more, because even without really, those interactions and, these big words in the political world or the corporate world, I think a lot can happen in the moment of a feeling and an emotion. So. Yeah, basically a very normal person. My hero is a very normal person.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. That means we all have an opportunity to be somebody's hero. So you've inspired us with hope. You've filled us with hope that this is possible to do, and the next generation of leaders has a responsibility to make these changes and to be regenerative leaders. How do we inspire change within the government structure to make change fast enough?
Yeah, so that's a tricky question, and honestly, I wish I had a ready-to-use answer. But basically, when you talk with the government, you know that in the way that they are structured, in the way that they are nurtured through their traditions, and the way that they do policies, you know, when they come up with policies or funding, you know that the system makes sure that whatever, you know, everything they do is slower than what we expect in the business world. All right. So what I find very powerful is there's a way to start conversations, and there are specific ways of convincing that is more linked to psychology and human behaviors than actually, you know, market driven type of, you know, like discussion or arguments. And when personally I won some, whether some deals or things like that, it was always through a personal connection, right? When you reaches something that nails the, you know, that nails it, and you're like, okay, this is it, and this is what's in it for that person. Also, what I would find very powerful to make this industry forward is that one player cannot do it all. If, for instance, I take Cascadia Seaweed as an example, if you guys are alone and are alone sitting at the table, very unlikely that things will move. So that's why I really insist on building those partnerships and coalitions, because you have not to be one person, you have to be 10 representative of the seaweed industry to talk to officials. So I hope it answers a bit of your question.
Yeah, this festival, the purpose of this festival was to bring people together, these like-minded individuals, to foster more collaboration in the industry, and to lift people up to join us in this seaweed revolution. Now, Karine, I go through the comments section, and so many are not questions. They are thanking you for an outstanding presentation, for being inspiring, for opening our eyes and minds to a regenerative leader model. I really get the sense from the chat that people are truly inspired. I just want to reflect on a couple of things I learned this week from Larry Johnson and also Jennifer Woodland, who talk about the philosophy of Indigenous cultures, to only take what they need and not more, and to live in harmony with nature, and to appreciate that we're all connected. And I can't help but be grateful for the Indigenous partnerships that we've created throughout the festival, but also through Cascadia. And those teachings, I think, are so important as we move forward with this new mindset. I really value that lesson as well.
Yeah, I do agree as well. I mean, I've reconnected myself to nature after a long period of disconnection. And this period of disconnection starts from your childhood. Like, this is something that is so ingrained in us that we just think about nature as this, you know, oh, let's take a walk in the forest, and, you know, that's fine. I'll get my you know, fresh air, and then I'll go home and I'll go back to my old habits. And we never think about nature as this like nurturing environment that basically makes sure that we live in, you know, healthy and that we can, you know, keep on thriving. So, but that's a much bigger topic on how we actually reconnect people with nature. And my work, for instance, at Coral Gunners, is really much to do that. So how can we make people aware of what a coral is, and how make sure that someone living in a tiny apartment in New York or in Toronto or in Vancouver can actually start acting for saving reefs. And that's something that we talk about almost every day, and we find ways to make it happen, you know. And that's the power of storytelling, and that's the power of also how you can use those modern technologies to make it happen. So yeah, that's I'm hopeful anyway. I think I'm not the only one out there. You guys are part of it as well.
Karine, I'd like to thank you. And I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. I hope that you get 24 connection requests on LinkedIn shortly after this presentation to foster that idea of partnerships that you identified in the 8 Ps. And I just really appreciate you being with us today and sharing your time. I'd like to thank the Bahia again for delivering the industry speaker series, and everyone for their time for joining us. We have one final live session this afternoon at 3 o'clock, and then our last culinary demonstration tonight at 5. And then to close it off, our final sleepy bedtime story, also on YouTube, on the Cascadia YouTube channel at 6 o'clock this evening.
Well, have fun. I wish you all the best, and I thank you again for inviting me. And if you have any questions, I'm sure, Erin, you will forward them to me, and I'll make sure to answer them. I see very interesting questions at the moment in the chat, so please forward.
I will do. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.